If you remember last week, we looked at that phrase, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. And now we come to the phrase that is attached to it really, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. I'll fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. So David here, he says, instead of living in a state of fear, where I fear evil, instead I will be comforted. Now, I don't know what image comes to your mind when you think of comfort. Maybe you think of this, a rather relaxed looking girl there. That's pretty idealistic, isn't it? That's the goal. Or what about this? Fluffy socks. Sarah loves fluffy socks. It's got here 2% comfort, 3% warmth, 95% sliding around like a ninja. Well, what about this? I typed into Google the world's most comfortable sofa, and this is the one that they gave me. What about this? Anyone got this as an image of comfort in their mind? Anyone relate to that? And my personal favorite, a bit of innovation in finding comfort and luxury. This guy is winning at life. No pool, no problem. I love that one. But we have in our mind, I guess, when we speak of comfort, that it's about safety and about luxury. But the Hebrew word here for comfort that David uses is this word naham, which is translated comfort 57 times, but it's also translated repent 41 times. And when it's used of repentance, really the image is of having inner strength to turn from one direction towards a positive action, a positive course of action in your life. So the emphasis is on what you are turning towards, and the fact that you are able to exert some inner resource in order to make that change in your life. And so really, comfort has this idea of strength in it. It's being strengthened. In fact, when you break down the actual word, it's come meaning with, and fort meaning strength, to do something with strength. So to be comforted then is to have stress alleviated. It is that. It's to find solace and to find relief from your affliction, but it ends with strength to turn towards a positive course of action in your life. And so David here is saying, I'm not going to be feared by evil, but I'm going to be strengthened by the rod and staff of the shepherd. In fact, this is illustrated really well in the Bayeux Tapestry. This tapestry tells us the story of the invasion of England by William the Conqueror. And in this particular panel, a bishop is seen laying into a group of reluctant soldiers, and he's actually chasing them with the handle of his sword. And the caption of this panel reads, Bishop Odo comforts the troops. Now, it's not exactly the kind of comfort that we started talking about earlier. Can you imagine going to a day spa and then being like, okay, after your massage, we're going to lead you to our very special treatment, being chased by a bishop with a sword. It's not exactly the image of comfort that comes to mind, right? And in this case, in the Bayeux Tapestry, the Norman troops were really afraid of the impressive fighting of the English under King Harold. And some of them were thinking of deserting, others of refusing to go into battle. And that is until Bishop Odo started chasing them with the handle of his sword. And actually they went into battle and they won the battle, strengthened by this rather interesting bishop. Now the point is that comfort is about giving weak and vulnerable people the inner strength to take a different course of action, to make positive steps. And so comfort is less the image of a day spa and more the image of a general's battle cry that emboldens his soldiers to move forward in a difficult situation. And it got me thinking, I think we really need a comforted church right now. Not one dependent on luxury and safety, but one that is emboldened and strengthened for the days to come. And so David here is saying, I will not be defined by the presence of evil around me, but by the presence of God with me. His rod and his staff provide me with relief from my affliction and the inner resource I need to turn towards a positive course of action in the valley of the shadow of death. He's speaking of being emboldened by God's presence. He's speaking of finding courage and strength from the Good Shepherd and his rod and staff. So what is it about the rod and staff that provides relief for David and strengthens him in the valley? Well, the rod and the staff were symbols of the shepherd's authority. The staff was a long walking stick and was used to guide the sheep, and the rod was used to protect and defend the sheep against any predators. In fact, when Saul questions David about whether he's able to fight Goliath or not, David replies in 1 Samuel 17:34-36. He says, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it." Shepherds were not to be messed with. David, the good shepherd, fought off the greatest of enemies. And actually, the image of a shepherd became linked to kings. They were the providers, the guiders, and protectors of their kingdoms. And the rod and the staff became an image of kingship, became an image of a monarch. David himself, when he is king, is described as the shepherd of Israel. And it's also, throughout the scriptures, a symbol of the power and authority of God. What does Moses put in the Red Sea to part it? He puts in a staff. And Gideon, he witnesses the angel of the Lord use a staff to perform a miraculous sign in Judges 6. And so the staff and the rod are a symbol of power and authority. So David is saying that the presence of God and his power and authority provide him with inner resource to take positive actions in the presence of evil. He's comforted and strengthened by the authority of God. Now, if we take a moment to look at the world around us, the idea of being comforted by authority is really hard to conceive. Everywhere we look, in almost every sphere of society, we can see the abuse of power and the suffering that authority has caused. From the absent father to the abusive boss, to the corrupt clergyman or the banker or politician. We live in a world marred by the abuse of power. Even the protests that we've witnessed recently are a cry of despair and anger from people who no longer trust those in power over them. And that's just one example. I could point to countless others. The economic crash and the abuse of power by banks who were too big to fail. Jimmy Savile and Operation Yewtree. The Me Too movement, the Catholic Church and the covering up of abusive priests and the exposure that came from the Boston Globe. The list really is endless. And even in the evangelical church, we are not free from this. We ourselves have experienced and witnessed the abuse of power. But David says he finds comfort in God's authority. But for many of us, and for the vast majority of human society, our experience is that we've been crushed by human authority. And the implications of this are big, because it's led to this deeply held conviction within the Western world that true fulfillment is found in freeing yourself from authority, to live independently. You know, we live in an age of the entrepreneur. Even businesses have had to adapt their leadership styles, because the kind of my way or the highway approach just doesn't cut it with younger generations anymore. We live in an age where you decide for yourself what is right and what is good. You look within yourself for your identity and value, not outside of yourself. Because to look outside of yourself for those things is to give someone else power over you, and that's not where freedom is found. Instead, we say, I decide who I am, what is good and what is wrong, what is valuable and what is not. And all of this, in some way, is a reaction to and a rejection of authority. And so comes the message that true self-fulfillment is found when you free yourself from all powers that are over you. The modern day mantra is this, that freedom is found in no man's land. That's the modern day mantra. Freedom is found in no man's land. So where does this lead us? Let's consider who we are in the psalm for a moment. We aren't the shepherd, we are the sheep. And a sheep is really one of the most defenseless animals out there. They really don't have a lot to protect themselves with. You're hardly built for fighting when you're covered in wool. You know, you're not exactly going to be a warrior covered in wool. And the picture of us being a sheep suggests that we are vulnerable and defenseless to so many of the powers that are around us. I think we could reflect that in our experience of COVID-19. The message of the psalm, though, is that a sheep without a shepherd is not free and fulfilled. A sheep without a shepherd is vulnerable and fearful. No man's land is not a place of freedom, but a place of fear. Because if a sheep frees itself from the authority and the protection of the shepherd, the wolf becomes its master. Suddenly its life is defined by the presence of its predators. You think about it, at the start of the psalm, it says, he, meaning the good shepherd, makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. Now, in society, there's this assumption that we can find green pastures and quiet waters without the guiding staff of the shepherd. But actually, that's not the message of the psalm. The message of the psalm is we need the guidance of the shepherd to even find the green pastures and the quiet waters. But let's imagine for a moment even that we did find the green pastures and the quiet waters. You still wouldn't be able to lie down there and rest. Think about it, you'd have no one to protect you, only your woolly cloak. You know, no one to cover your back. You'll be constantly looking over your shoulder, constantly living in anxiousness and fear of the very real and present danger of predators around you. And so to shake off the authority of God leads to an existence not of freedom, but leads to an existence full of fear. You know, I find it really revealing that in the same society that pursues passionately personal freedom and shakes off any kind of ultimate authority is also a society with a prevailing sense of anxiety, worry, depression, and fear. Because what we thought would lead to freedom has actually led us to be fearful. And cue David. You know, David says, I don't live in fear because I am a sheep under a good shepherd. His rod and his staff, his guidance and protection, even though I walk through the valley of darkness, his authority provides me with inner strength to face the world. It provides me with inner strength to take positive steps in the midst of darkness. You know, the idea that God is over everything, that his authority is greater than any other authority, is absolutely essential for a life of peace, a life free from anxiousness. To find rest, we need to cultivate a deep awareness, not just of God's presence, but also of his power and of his authority. I was telling someone the other day, the only reason I can sleep well at night is because at the end of the day, I can pray this prayer: Lord, I've done the best with what you've given me, and now I trust you with it all. Now, if my prayer was simply, Lord, I've done my best with what you've given me, I wouldn't be able to lay down and rest at night, because very often my best is not enough. Very often I fall short. I also need to be able to pray, Lord, I trust you with the rest. And I can only trust God with the things that matter most if I believe that he has the power and authority to cover those things, to control those things, to oversee those things. If God is small and weak, then what would be the point in praying that prayer? I need his power and his authority to lay down and rest and to be free from anxiousness in my heart and in my mind. And so freedom isn't found in no man's land. It's found in God's country, where we know that no matter how uncertain life is, his staff will guide us, and no matter how present evil is, his rod will protect us. What we need is not freedom from authority, but to come under perfect authority. And this is the good news of the gospel. Jesus shows us that he is perfect in his power. Just imagine this for a moment. Every single room that Jesus walked into, he was the most powerful person present. Can you imagine? The most powerful person in the room wherever he went. And yet, what does he do with that power? When he's with his disciples, he gets down on his knees and he starts to wash his feet. The most powerful person in the room, on the earth, in the entire cosmos, shows us that his heart is to serve us. And so, actually, the most powerful man to ever walk the earth submitted himself to the abuse of power, the Roman Empire, the injustice of an unfair trial, and a corrupt execution. And in that moment, he doesn't just show us the extent of his power to overcome death. He also shows us his heart to use that power to bring us life. What does Jesus say in Matthew 11:28-29? Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. But then he says this: take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. He is gentle and humble in heart. The God who is so powerful he upholds the universe is also gentle and humble. He is absolutely pure and absolutely powerful. And that kind of authority is not crushing, but incredibly comforting. Isn't it interesting? The call to submit to his ways, to take our yoke upon it, his yoke upon ourselves, leads to us finding a place of rest. Take my yoke and you will find rest. We so often try to find comfort by being in control. But the scriptures tell us that comfort is found in submission, in relinquishing control to submit to the good shepherd. I'll leave you with this final verse, Proverbs 3, 5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. Comfort is found in submitting our lives to God, not freeing our lives from him. So here's the good news of this psalm. As I walk through the valley of the shadow, in my uncertainty, I can find comfort in his authority. As I submit my ways to him, he will guide me. In the presence of evil, I find peace in the knowledge of his power. He reminds me that he has defended me at the cross. He has conquered sin and death and all evil. And he has used his power to offer me eternal life. And that gives me confidence. It gives me inner resource to face whatever lies ahead of me. He is with me. He will guide me, defend me, because he is absolutely powerful and absolutely pure. So maybe you're looking for comfort right now. Let me say to you, comfort's not found in control. It's found in surrender. Maybe right now what you need to do is surrender some things up to God. Maybe you need to open up clenched fists and say, Lord, I trust you because you are absolutely pure and absolutely powerful. So remember, he's sovereign. Remember, he's good. He's humble and he's gentle. And then submit your ways to him. Submit your thoughts to him. Submit your feelings to him. Wherever you are, wherever you stand, choose to surrender. We're going to take a moment now to share communion together as we round up our time.